Picture a hotel room, an old-fashioned TV mounted to the wall, an open suitcase beneath it full of books and papers, a styrofoam coffee cup, dishes piled high with the remains of someone's breakfast. On the TV screen is a newscaster. The image projected beside him, that of the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. The years of his birth and his death, 39 of them under his name, 1929 to 1968. This photograph was taken on April 4th, 1968, by photographer Steve Shapiro. Its title, Dr. Martin Luther King's Motel Room After He Was Shot, Memphis, Tennessee. Everything just as it had been moments before, though nothing was the same. Picture a man walking to his death. The date, April 9th, 1945, the place, Flossenburg concentration camp. The man, all of 39 years old, turns to a fellow prisoner to pass a message to his mentor, if at all possible. This is the end, he says, but for me it is the beginning of life. Dietrich Bonhoeffer was a Lutheran and Reformed German pastor, a part, along with the members of his family, of a failed plot to assassinate Adolf Hitler. Hitler survived the attempt on his life. Bonhoeffer was hanged at dawn that April morning, just weeks before the Allies liberated Europe. The anniversaries of both men's deaths straddle this weekend. And we continue our sermon series today on Souls Ablaze. These were certainly two souls ablaze. And as we mark their deaths, I invite us to reflect on their lives, on their words and their deeds, and on what it is to which they call us today. Now, neither of these men were saints, though they are often heralded as such. Moreover, their memories are now claimed by all sorts of folks. Both men were remarkably brave, both of them selfless, and for both this was hard won. To be brave, I always say, is to be afraid and to do it anyway. They were, and they did. Picture King at 27 at his kitchen table in Montgomery, Alabama, in the midst of leading the bus boycott, fielding one threatening phone call after another while his wife and infant daughter slept. One call in January 1956 nearly broke him. With my head in my hands, he wrote later, I bowed over the kitchen table and prayed aloud, Lord, I'm down here trying to do what is right. I think I'm right. I am here taking a stand for what I believe is right. But Lord, I must confess that I am weak now. I am faltering. I am losing my courage. Now I am afraid, he said, and I've come to the point where I cannot face it alone. And then he was not alone. It seems, he continues, as though I could hear the quiet assurance of an inner voice saying, Martin Luther, stand up for righteousness, stand up for truth, and lo, I will be with you. Almost at once, he writes, my fears began to go. My uncertainty disappeared. I was ready to face anything. Bonhoeffer, too, had a moment where he feared for his life, and he got on a boat in order to save it. The year was 1939. The theologian Reinhold Niebuhr, with whom Bonhoeffer had studied at Union Theological Seminary in New York City, arranged for the promising young pastor to flee Germany and take refuge at Union, the school where both Reverend Taryn and I would study decades later. In Germany, Bonhoeffer's work as leader of the Confessing Church, the group of German pastors who stood up to the Third Reich, who refused to take an oath to Hitler, who protected members of their own community and of the Jewish faith, had made him an enemy of the state. He was banned from speaking, banned from publishing, forbidden to meet with more than 3 people at a time. His arrest was imminent, and he knew what was at stake. And so Bonhoeffer came back to New York, where he had found the liberal theology at Union lacking, And he had found the spiritual and religious life of the Black church at Abyssinian Baptist down the street profoundly inspiring. One would have expected him to feel relief in safety, but a month into his stay, he grew restless. He wrote to Niebuhr, he said, "I have come to the conclusion that I made a mistake in coming to America. I shall have no right to take part in the restoration of Christian life in Germany after the war unless I share the trials of this time with my people." And so he sailed back to Germany. And shortly after, he joined his brothers and brother-in-law in the plan to assassinate Hitler. He justified the taking of one life in order to save the lives of millions, in order to rescue the world, in order to save what he called Christian civilization. What emerges from struggle for both of these men is a clarity of thought, a passion of purpose, a voice infused with vision. And are we not in need of all of those things right now? We are longing for prophets. You see, prophets, biblical and otherwise, they speak not of an arbitrary future. They share in desperate and dangerous times the vision of a future that is possible but not guaranteed. A vision not of what was or what is, but what could be. Visions of the status quo turned on its head. And as Unitarian Universalists, we look to the words and deeds of a prophetic people. Their words and deeds are revered sources of wisdom in our tradition. Words and deeds which challenge us to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love. Now, we are not alone in this, in looking to prophets. Traditionally, our Muslim siblings recognize 124,000 prophets. Adam and Eve being the first, and Muhammad, peace be upon him, being the last. Now, in the next few days, the sacred month of Ramadan will end. Ramadan celebrates the giving of the Quran to the Prophet Muhammad. And as the story goes, Muhammad, who was solidly minding his own business, meditating and praying in a cave, as he was wont to do, he is suddenly visited by the angel Gabriel and told to recite, also translated as read. And Muhammad, like any good prophet, is reluctant at first. He refuses. He says, "But I can't read." And he wasn't lying. He was illiterate. But then he is squeezed by a force that he cannot see, until he recants and he begins to recite the words given to him that still today comprise the beginning of the Holy Quran. The Hebrew Bible is also full of reluctant prophets. Tradition tells us that the prophet Jeremiah was told by God, "Before you were born, I set you apart. I appointed you as a prophet to the nations." And Jeremiah responds, "Alas, sovereign Lord, I do not know how to speak. I am too young." Can you imagine back-talking God? "Alas, I'm sorry, I'm busy, I'm young, I can't do it." Well, God responds in this story essentially, "Pshaw. Do not say I am too young," God says. "You must go to everyone I send you to and say whatever I command you." It was Jeremiah whom the poet references, the one who placed the rope around his own neck to symbolize the yoke of Babylon and was thrown in a cistern and left to die. A cadre of good citizens pulled him out, and he prophesied to the leaders of Jerusalem that their city would fall to the Babylonians. They did not want to hear what he had to say. Admittedly, his words were harsh, to say the least. And one can imagine those ice-pick eyes flashing. His mission? To call his people back into covenant with their God, to call them to account, to entreat them, do what is just and right. He says, rescue the hand of the oppressor, the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence. Rescue from the hand of the oppressor, the one who has been robbed. Do no wrong or violence to the foreigner, the fatherless, or the widow. And do not shed innocent blood in this place. He spoke directly to kings and leaders. Who died and made you king of anything, he said. He spoke truth to power. He exhorted them to change their ways or else. Now, a young Martin Luther King Jr., a seminary student, looked to Jeremiah as, quote, a shining example of the truth that religion should never sanction the status quo. Religion, King wrote in a paper in the fall of 1948 at the age of 19. He said, through men like Jeremiah, religion provides for its own advancement and carries within it the promise of progress and renewed power. But society destroys such men, he wrote. Jeremiah died a martyr. 20 years later, King would die a martyr himself. At 39, the life of the father of four, husband to Coretta, inspiration to a people, a nation, and a world would be destroyed with a single shot. King knew his work was dangerous. He knew that to carry the promise of progress, to harness the possibility of the renewed power of the religious, the spiritual, the moral voice was to risk death. And he was not dissuaded from the import of his call. King felt that he was an heir to the spiritual prophetic tradition. I come, he said, with a feeling that I have been called to preach and lead God's people. I have felt like Jeremiah, he said, that the word of God is in my heart like burning fire shut up in my bones. Like burning fire shut up in my bones. I ask you this morning, what is it that you know to be true, so ultimately and eternally true that it feels like a burning fire shut up in your bones? Now, your truth may not be a word given to you by God, but it may be. However, your most burning truth about our world, our nation, our society has come to you, I invite you to bring that truth into your mind and into your being right here, right now. What is it? Perhaps you hold in mind the truth that all genders are whole, holy, and good. Perhaps it is the truth that all children are worthy of love and care. That war is never the answer. Or that all people deserve safety, wholeness, and compassion, and that no human being is illegal. Perhaps the truth you are calling to mind in this moment is that our earth requires our dedication and our work towards its restoration. That love is love is love. Or that all beings are worthy of respect and protection. Perhaps it's something entirely different. Whatever your most fired up, no question, no wavering, no holds barred truth is, let me ask you this now. What is it that you are willing to do to live out this truth in the world? How far have you gone in commitment to your truth? And how far are you willing to go? How much are you willing to sacrifice? These are the questions that King and Bonhoeffer ask of us from beyond the grave. Bonhoeffer's answer? He was willing to sacrifice everything in the service of his belief that a true disciple of Jesus Christ cannot also pledge allegiance to a nationalist state. His reasoning was complex. It was not without issue. And it is true that many of us can be challenged to translate his thought through a Unitarian Universalist lens, because Bonhoeffer's thought is exclusively based in the divinity and the sovereignty of Jesus Christ. His question was, what is one willing to lay aside in order to follow Jesus? This, I would venture to guess, is not the primary question of faith for many of us in this room, though it may be for some of us. Nonetheless, I believe that Bonhoeffer challenges us to ask what true dedication to our faith requires of us. What is it we are willing to lay aside? What is it we are willing to take up in order to call ourselves Unitarian Universalists? People of faith, dedicated to the inherent worth and dignity of all people, and to the interdependent web of which we are a part. What does it mean to be a disciple, a follower, a believer of this faith? Bonhoeffer writes in his opus, The Cost of Discipleship, this about what it means to become a disciple. The disciple, he says, is dragged out of relative security into a life of absolute insecurity. From a life which is observable and calculable into a life where everything is unobservable and fortuitous. Out of the realm of finite and into the realm of infinite possibilities, which is the one liberating reality. Again, this transformation of a life happens for Bonhoeffer when one decides to lay down one's life to follow Jesus. I do not want to lose that particularity of his thought. But I have been thinking about this. I've been wrestling with it. I've been exploring the possibilities. And I'll tell you this, my friends. If we are going to sing for change, we are going to have to let go of our relative security. And if we are going to confront powers and structures of evil with justice, compassion, and the transforming power of love, well, we are going to have to let go of what is observable and calculable, the status quo, and get our imaginations fired up. And if we are going to live, and we are going to sing, and we are going to work and fight and organize our way out of this mess that our country is in, and this mess that our world is in, and this mess that our planet is in, then we are going to have to dwell in the realm of infinite possibilities. That is the only way we will be set free. Now, we are taking up the call here at UUCA and nationally as an association of congregations. We are working for and with immigrant families and asylum seekers and trans kids. We are working with Black, Indigenous, and people of color, fighting for equity, fighting for voting rights, fighting for climate justice. We are and we will not stop working diligently and determinedly for reproductive rights, for speaking out against war and conflict all over the world. We are sifting through the ashes with our burned hands. So let us tell each other what will come after. Because we are the ones for whom we have been longing. We are souls ablaze. These are desperate and dangerous times. But this is not the end. This is the beginning.